Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Actually Useful, the podcast where we diagnose what's wrong with the internet and chat with the great folks who are trying to fix it. So welcome, Marcos, and hi again, Ariel. How's it going?
Hello. Good. How are you?
Doing good. First up, do you have any cool news for us?
Okay, so the news segment is normally full of despair and woe and just like is a constant march of enshittification. By the time this comes out, this will no longer be news. But as of recording, we're 2 days out from Hank Green releasing Focus Friend. Is this all over y'all's feeds as well?
It should be. I love the Green brothers.
First of all, here's the main headline. It is now the most downloaded app in the world. It has beat out ChatGPT. Hank Green has the #1 spot. John Green cannot stop trolling him because he thinks it's so fucking funny that Hank Green just made this thing on a whim and it's now outbeating every fucking app. Basically, it is a little bean. It's a little animated bean. It's a focus timer. When you say that you're focusing, the bean is knitting. He has his back turned and he's busy knitting. And if you interrupt, you can you can have it so that it disables all your apps. And if you interrupt it by playing on your phone or tootling on your phone, he drops all his stitches and then isn't making any more work. And so if you let him finish, he'll make socks and scarves that you can then trade for decorations in this bean's little room. And I'm a huge user of Finch, the Finch app, and I am just personally here for the Tamagotchification of every single self-care thing we could be doing. It is so obvious between Finch and Focus Friend how much people just want to keep care of a tiny little pet that is also them, and all the user comments on people's
it's so cute.
It's so cute. I'm also I'm a big bean girl. My cat's name's Beans. My favorite food is beans. I'm here for bean magic. But yeah, I'm obsessed with this app. It's super easy to use. It's free. Go get Focus Friend. And I think this is like a bunch of my friends sent it to me because they're get Hank Green on your podcast, which love Hank, if you're listening, let's do something. But I just think it's such a good story of he found this thing that was a simple need that people have, made a really cute, delightful app, partnered with someone to make this amazing tool. And now it's succeeding because it's just such a simple, unshittified tool that helps people live a better life by being off their phone.
Those brothers should win some sort of Nobel Peace Prize.
They really should.
Were you a NaNoWriMo person, either of you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm a NaNoWriMo person, yeah.
For those of you who don't know, NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, aka the best month of the year for nerds in high school who didn't have any friends and had an excuse to write the whole month with their friends. What'd you write about last year?
I had this idea, a woman novelist who had a shamed career. She fucked up her career. She did a bunch of bad things. And then she started writing under a man's pseudonym and started writing MM fiction. And people were tripping up because it was she found an actor to play this hot young writer, and basically no gay fiction. Well, this is kind of changing, but most gay fiction is written by straight women. It is not written by gay men. And so this was the whole idea was that everybody thought it was this hot young gay guy who wrote this actual romance novel, but it was actually just this woman novelist. But I ended up abandoning it, and now I'm in Zookeeper brain rot, as has come up on previous episodes. So if you guys are really interested in a Zookeeper romance, it's coming. Published by Actually Useful Publishing.
You should talk to Sal's Zookeeper friends.
I know. I need to reach out to him because that is so exciting to me.
Sal was one of our prior guests, and he's also based in London. Marcos, whereabouts in London are you based?
So I live in South London, a little neighborhood called Camberwell. Florence and the Machine goes to the coffee shop near my house, so I am stalking it, hoping. She's very busy, and I don't even think she's in London, but
you should just the dark days. Just
yeah, that's the way to do it. Start singing her songs off key.
Yeah.
I think that's her cat call that she'll her dog
Totally.
call.
That'll summon her. Yeah. Well, Marcos, tell us about yourself. You're a UX researcher. How did you get into UX? How did you go from being an anthropologist into being a UX researcher? Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. So like many UX researchers at roughly sort of my stage in career, we all fall into UX research by accident. It's a lot of people's second or third career. I was an academic, and shockingly, not a giant demand for people with an expertise in performance and sensory ethnography with a focus on like critical race theory and queer affect. Who knew? And I sort of knew towards the end of my dissertation, as I was like wrapping up my PhD, I was like, I don't like working by myself. I'm not good at it. And I don't like sort of working in isolation, which is kind of, you think I would have picked up on this, before the last 3 months of grad school. Anyway, so I moved to London for personal reasons, then boyfriend, now husband, and was trying to figure out what I was going to do and sort of fell into consulting, the savior of everyone who got a social science degree. And kind of from there, engineered a pivot into UX research. Yeah, so I've been doing it probably around 10 years now.
As somebody who's now looking to get into academia from like UX research, what is the biggest difference from when you're interviewing people in an academic context versus a corporate context?
I'd say the biggest difference is, when I was doing interviews for my PhD and sort of any side research project along the way, it was entirely about like what I was interested in, the project and my focus. And I really got to, kind of decide the parameters of the conversation. Whereas, when I'm doing research at work, I'm thinking in the back of my head is, okay, am I getting what the product manager needs? Am I getting, like, do the designers have questions? So it's still sort of focused on a topic, but I've also got the kind of like whir of project objectives that meet business objectives in the back of my head, which isn't necessarily, I don't hate it. I actually kind of love my job. But yeah, there's a sort of like business filter in the way I have a conversation as compared to when I was like talking to people about how they think about like belonging in home kind of thing.
Yeah, a little bit more to the point, I guess, in terms of like auditing their journey.
Yeah.
I'm so interested. So like one of the things we talk a lot about in the context of enshittification is this creeping like scourge of dark patterns all over the web. I think Accept Cookies was sort of like a breaking point for me because it's such a good example. I always call it like the plastic bag of the internet because at least in California, we had the plastic bag legislation many years ago, and like a bunch of like liberal coastal elites voted to be like, yeah, plastic bags, let's get rid of them. But in fact, like the only change, like the whole point was that these companies were supposed to solve the problem of plastic bags. It was not that what we actually wanted was to pay 10 cents for plastic bags that use even more plastic and are like less biodegradable. And so Accept Cookies is a great example of that because the point of the legislation that drove these companies to put an Accept Cookies modal on their websites is that like you were supposed to solve user privacy. Like the legislation was saying, hey, actually we found that like these patterns that websites are doing violates users' privacy. You shouldn't do that anymore. So they were like, well, cool. Our loophole is if we tell the user we're violating their privacy and give them no choice except to say, okay, then that's what we'll do. So that's what happened. And I'm just so curious, like what your take is on as someone who, thinks about these UX patterns and how they affect users and how they affect their journeys. Like how have you been experiencing this sort of like dark pattern scourge?
It's funny because when we first talked about doing the podcast, I, of course, then started noticing it everywhere. And it feels so pernicious. And I'm just noticing it like more and more and more. Oh, let's just make it like really difficult to do the thing that the service you're using is supposed to do, or to opt out of sharing your information, the way you guys talk about enshittification and the way you guys are like framing it around this like sort of like plastic waste thing that does feel increasingly difficult to opt out. And it's increasingly difficult to find a way to be where people are on the internet without just kind of accepting, okay, yeah, I just have to deal with this like saccharine flavor of the internet every time I want to use something on the internet.
Yeah, and I think it's a good example of hostile UX, like what you said, of like they make it so that any path a user goes down that isn't the intended path by the business is a miserable user experience. I've seen some sites that say manage. I think the more common one in the US is that the two options are accept cookies or deny, or like X out of the modal completely and just disregard consenting or not. I actually don't know what disregarding consent does. I'm kind of assuming that they still assume consent, which is problematic. But one of my friends commented that like every time she always hits deny and she's like, no, don't take my cookies. And then the next time she goes to the site, she gets the pop-up again. And my mind is like, that's actually because like in order to save that you, the user, saw the modal and denied it, you'd need a cookie. Like you'd have to have a client-side cookie to actually like save that. So it is also just like I don't know what the solution is to these problems other than these companies doing the work to actually like make their product more transparent and more privacy conscious, which unfortunately I feel very nihilistic about the odds of that happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though. So over the years, I've gotten to work on a couple of different privacy related projects with consumers, and oftentimes people are actually okay and are willing to exchange some level of personal information if they understand what they're getting from it. It's interesting, like in the ad space, like the amount of people who are like, actually, I really like my Instagram ads. Like they really understand who I am. So I don't mind them. In a sense, I feel like defaulting to just like the worst option also keeps companies from exploring like, what would it mean to actually tell people in a way that was maybe not delightful. I hate that word and it's so overused in UX, but like in a way that, feels like an even playing field. Like, okay, we're going to like, let's talk about this as like a business arrangement. Like you are going to give us some of your like personal information and here is what you get. And I've noticed some newspaper sites, I think it was like, I saw that on like Lad Bible today, is saying like, okay, you can, if you don't want to subscribe, you have to accept cookies and we'll give you access to the site. If you don't want to accept cookies, you can pay for a subscription to access the content. I was like, amazing. You're giving me this like very clear option. And I now understand like what the exchange value is.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about this because this is a thing I've been chewing on for a while. I mean, we've all heard by now the phrase that like, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, that they're collecting your data and they're getting your engagement and they're farming it that way. I think people know that. What I love about that example is it's basically saying what we're trying to do is give you the best product possible with the most access possible. You can use it for free or you can pay for it. That is sort of like a quintessential freemium model of like, there's a free option that's kind of worse. You can pay for it if you like it, right? So it's sort of like more than a free trial because you could keep using it indefinitely if it's free, but they know that the free version is like kind of bad. I am curious, like, I think Spotify is a good example of, I have been paying for Spotify for many, many years. I feel like I bought premium as soon as that became a thing. And I only recently now, because I also have an account for the podcast, and the podcast account, because I don't use it as like a listener, it's just the free, I'm just using it to upload, right? And so I'm like seeing the freemium experience and it's terrible. It's awful. Like you can't do anything. There's so many ads. There's so much clutter. I am curious like what your thoughts are on if freemium models are only able to be supported by tons of ads and upsells, like to try to get you into the subscription pathway. Like, is a freemium model itself a dark pattern? Like, is it more fair to offer a full experience free trial and say, hey, you get this for 7 days. And then unfortunately, like we don't offer an experience that degrades the UX. I'm just really chewing on like, is freemium itself at one time freemium was so like revolutionary. Mm-hmm. And now it just feels like it's kind of crap. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this because, like I like that news sites. I don't think the option for news sites should be pay or nothing because, not everyone, can. I'm equally torn about it because it also then becomes a question of there is that sort of pernicious almost like inevitable, okay, let's just make the freemium experience so terrible that people will eventually just sign up just to not deal with this anymore. I'm just not sure in instances where there is no other kind of like profit model. So like, I think news is a really good example of that. Like what is I'm not sure if I can think of another way to fund it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, publicly supported. Realistically, like tomorrow, I don't know what the other option is. Yeah, I feel equally conflicted about it because I do think it is this sort of like, let's just make it just inconvenient enough that people, okay, I'll fork over a few dollars to not deal with this anymore.
Yeah, and the free versions, they experience the same curve of enshittification that all these apps do, which is that in the beginning, like back in the day when I signed up for the premium Spotify subscription, the free version was perfectly usable. Like that was how most people were using Spotify. And so it spreads word of mouth, it creates a network effect. Everybody's using this app because it's got such a low barrier to entry and it's so delightful. And then just like we see with every other app, the curve starts to become more coercive, more controlling over what the users are doing, how much the users are paying for it, how much benefit they're getting in return. I feel like I could do a whole episode just on the absolute crapshoot that is Spotify's audiobooks feature. As a person who just blows through audiobooks, like the amount of like the idea of cutting off an audiobook because you no longer have hours is one of the most dystopian things I can possibly think of. Like that fundamentally is not how a book works. Like it's just like what are we doing here, folks? Like this is not what we do with content. But I digress. I will not go into the scourge of the audiobook cutoffs.
One thing when I first got to the UK, I was fascinated, honestly, by Monzo and the fact that everyone defaults to debit. In general, people kind of knew how much money they had and would spend that amount of money. And then Monzo would be like, oh, time to re-up your Monzo, which I know that sounds, as someone like living in the UK, it's probably like, oh yeah, of course. But someone coming from the US, I was like, no, everyone's just tapping their card. And then they just get to the end of the month. They're like, I hope I have enough money to pay off my credit card.
So I'm Canadian, and Canada's a lot like we live off. I used to just use my credit card for everything. There is a real sort of cultural difference here. One, around access to credit and the amount of credit you're given. And two, it is way more common to meet people here who don't have a credit card. And when I first moved here from Canada, I was like, what do you mean you don't have a credit card?
Yeah.
Like I have like 12 or whatever. Like, so people here tend to have more bank accounts. And a lot of people, for example, use Monzo as their like fun money bank account. So they transfer their fun money, and it's a way of knowing how much money they have to spend for the month.
Wait, tell us what Monzo is, Marcos, for the US listeners who do not know.
Yeah, okay. So actually Monzo exists in the US, but it is a slightly different product. Yeah. So Monzo is a digital bank here in the UK. They have been around since, I want to say, I believe it was like 2015, 2016. Yeah, 2015, because we just celebrated 10 years. I just joined Monzo in February, so new hire. And it's a digital bank, all the functions of a bank, but just through an app. We don't have branches.
But it's like beloved. And like I was on my UK rap playlist, and now I saw this artist. Her artist name is Monzo. Like that's how much it's part of the culture. Is people are like, oh no, Monzo me. Like it shows up in rap songs. It shows up everywhere. Like people, and it's similar to like, oh, Venmo me. But people, I think, kind of hate Venmo because the search is bad and they like make your payments public. Monzo is completely the opposite. And the other thing that was weird to me is like, it's actually not that easy. Like you need people's sort code and their bank account. Like you need a kind of a lot of more codes than you would have like somebody's Venmo handle. But it's still, yeah, people are like, oh, it's so easy and the best thing ever. And like they love the little orange card. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the brand has a lot of love. So it's the 7th largest bank in the UK. Most people use this as their like secondary bank account. And there's a lot of brand love. I will say that like in terms of like brand voice and sort of how Monzo sort of shows up in the market is, I think, like really cool and really fun. And it is fascinating to see how many, when I do user research for Monzo, how many people are like, I love Monzo, which is not, people talk about us in a way that is very different from the way people mostly talk about their like banking institution.
Yeah, that's cool. Crazy to be like, I love my bank, unless it's like a credit union. I've never heard somebody say that. Yeah. I also often think, if anybody knows someone who worked at Venmo in the early days, can somebody please tell me what was happening in the room where they were like, what we should do is make it a social feed? Like, why did that happen?
And default to public. And so just obviously
default
going
to public, and then
stir up controversy with your friends or like your exes.
Literally. Like I see so many of my friends selling drugs to each other, and it is so obvious by what they choose to obfuscate the Venmo. And like, you could just not put anything like, and it's also funny because now people turned it off, but I feel like most people turned it off in like 2018, 2019. So people that I'm just now meeting, it's like a time capsule. I get to see like, because they still have their public transactions from like 2018. And I'm like, what were you doing? Oh, you weren't even married yet. Oh my God. You're like going out with this, it's like I'm learning all this like tea I probably shouldn't be learning about them, but it just is such a confounding feature of like, what did they think was going to happen when they were like, yes, this should be a social feed? When you think about Monzo being beloved, are there like UX dark patterns that or just dark patterns in general? I guess the whole thing is user experience, but like dark patterns that other banks do that like make it so different for why people are having this experience with Monzo, where they like, it's part of the culture? Banking
is so regulated in the UK, so I don't know if I can think of a sort of dark pattern from a high street bank that sticks out. I don't know if that's a great example. I think a lot of the brand love comes from Monzo trying to make it like very easy to do the job you want to do. And so in a sense, like I think we try to avoid that by sort of really trying to focus on like what's the user need. How do we get people like in and out, And one of the reasons I wanted to move into banking after so much time in social media and e-commerce was I was starting to feel a bit like a cigarette salesman, where I was like optimizing for session time. I was optimizing for like, how do we get people to revisit more often, to look at more ads, to buy more shit? And I was just starting, I had a bit of a like, I can't keep doing this. Like this.
Oh my God. We literally had the same experience at the same time. Yeah. I was like, I actually don't like shopping and wish people would shop less. So why do I work in e-commerce?
Yeah. Right. And it really got to me when I was doing a user interview at my last job. And someone said, yeah, sometimes, at the end of the day, when my wife and I are tired, we just sit beside each other and like look for deals for things we want to buy. And I was just like, oh God, I can't.
That's dark. That's dark.
I can't do this. And so don't get me wrong, right? Like we live in late stage capitalism. It is what it is. The bank isn't some sort of like socialist space utopia as much as I wish it was, but it is nice to, I'm not optimizing for session time. I'm not optimizing to get people to look at more ads. I'm not optimizing people to convince them or to make it hard to like cancel a subscription. So I feel really lucky in a sense to be working on a product that actually kind of makes its money providing a service in a different way, if that makes sense.
But aren't technically you optimizing for people to spend more money in the sense of you get, I guess I should know this, but I'm assuming Monzo makes a very small percentage be on transactions. So you would hypothetically want more transactions. And then don't you also have a subscription now too?
Yeah, there is a subscription. The subscription provides like a little bit higher of an interest savings rate. And then some perks like a rail card, a free sausage roll a month. So I would say that like the user experience isn't so altered that you need to get the subscription to like unlock the core functionality of Monzo.
Yeah.
I would say that like the subscription sort of provides extras, which is why we call them perks, as opposed to, oh, this makes it easier to achieve X, Y, Z. And then, so I would say that like any bank, we want to be the place that is your primary bank. We want you to choose us to spend your money. That might just be a rationalization in my head, but to me, I'm like, well, people are spending money. Like people need a way to pay for things. So it feels less gross than how do we get people to like look for coupons every day?
Yeah, or how do we get them to pay to not pay, and then we get that interest, because that's like basically credit cards in the US.
Yeah,
that you want people to overspend, and I guess you guys don't want people to you want people to spend what they have and not overspend.
I think one of the things you were saying a couple of minutes ago, transparently, like the thesis of this show is that like AJ and I don't necessarily know what does make something actually useful. And so we were like, oh, there's actually a lot of meat here of like trying to figure out like what does it mean to try to find agency in this system? What does it mean to find agency as a user? How do we stop having these existential crises of like, oh my God, I wish I could stop making people buy things they don't need? And there's a couple like things that come to mind for me. I think one thing that was really instrumental, we're both big fans of David Graeber, the anarchist anthropologist, and he talks about like in Bullshit Jobs, he talks about how anything that creates demand is by definition bullshit. And I think that's a really interesting, like in sort of the duality of what you were talking about there is like people are going to have to, like banks exist, like banking, there might be an alternative future where like we have a totally different concept of banks, but that's really not on the table in any agreed upon form at the moment. So like you're going to have a digital bank. And so like already you're working in this space of something that is a utility that exists. And so then the question becomes, how do you make it the best utility possible? And I think what you were saying in describing sort of like the subscription versus the free version is like the product does what you need it to do. And that's another sort of heuristic I use of like, I think a lot of times e-commerce news is a great example, actually. A lot of news sites, like they're actually not news sites, they're ad sites. Like when the product is intended to do what it actually does. And so like news sites are intended to sell ads. That is the purpose of them. The news is how they get the traffic. That's it. And so it's interesting to think about people who have the opportunity to work on designing these products that are what they say that they are, right? Like it is a banking app. It says it's a banking app. You use it to do the thing you think you're going to go do with it.
Yeah. And I would say that like after spending many years being a UX researcher and interviewing users for products that were entirely ad driven, I'm sure in a few years I'll have some existential crisis about working at a bank. Yeah. But for now, it feels like such a relief where I'm like, I'm working on something where like, I'm not trying to optimize for people to like log into their Monzo every day if they don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't think about revisitation. It's incredibly refreshing spending some time getting to think sort of deeply about like, what is the thing, like, what is the job you're trying to accomplish? How do we make Monzo the easiest place to accomplish that job? That feels very different than the last 9 years of my career.
Yeah. In your career, I'm curious, more broadly speaking, sort of like what are the categories of dark patterns that you've seen? Like what are some of the most like common uses of dark patterns across consumer tech? Because obviously they exist because the business finds them beneficial in some way. Like it's that hostile UX pattern of like trying to get the user to go in the direction. But there are sort of like they're calling patterns for a reason. So like what are these patterns? Like what are the categories of them? And how can our listeners start to develop the eye that you've been using and really spot these patterns out there in the world?
Yeah, I would say that in e-commerce, it's anything that sort of feels like a disguised ad. I think about this a lot with like any sort of content that at first you're like, oh, this is content. And then you sort of realize, oh no, this is an ad. In social media, I would say that even like I spent a lot of time researching content creators, a very sort of beloved population. For me, I really like, they were a sort of cool group to study, but a lot of creator content now, I'm like, oh, this is entirely an ad. And ads are now sort of really adopting the creator almost like genre to present an ad. So it takes a second or two to realize, oh, this isn't an influencer talking about something. This is like a company.
Yeah, wait, I have to tell you this thing. I'm covering, are you guys familiar with the app T? I don't think we've talked about it yet on this podcast, but it is all over the Inchification news. So if you remember, like there's a Facebook group called Are We Dating the Same Guy? That is like women go into it and they post a picture of this new guy that they're dating. And they say like, is anybody else dating him? Like, do you have dirt on this person that I should know before I start dating? And then women will either be like, he looks good, girl, or whatever. Or like, yeah, that's my ex. He's a dickhead, whatever. So there's a whole story. We could do like a whole episode on T because there's so much drama coming out right now. This guy developed this app called T that's supposed to be like a women's dating safety feature or whatever. And they've just recently had 2 massive data breaches that were really scary because women are sharing information about like their abortions and like their domestic violence history and like shit that definitely should not be public. But 404 Media has done a really great, like they broke the news on the data breach. They're breaking the news on a whole bunch of like dirt they're digging up on T. Basically, this guy like stole the woman who created Are We Dating the Same Guy's idea. But you saying this content creator as like the idea of an ad disguised as content creation. They're doing that. This is the first time I've seen that. So they are working with T is working with this like content creation farm. And one of the things they do is they make clips that look like podcasts. So it's a person with a mic who isn't talking to anyone. They're just saying, like, have you heard of this app T? It's amazing. And it's just them in their room talking. And like, I went down this whole rabbit hole of all this content creation that's sponsored content that looks like it's organic. In China right now, there's like these AI content creators that are like on 24/7, these sellers that are on 24/7. And I was like, oh my God, this is what's going to happen is like these fake podcasts that are like, or fake, conversation with your friend, and all of it's completely staged. So I just was thinking like, that's so insidious. I think that pattern too falls into like a broader lies of omission category of like the hidden fees, the removing bad reviews, the like anything that you're doing that is deliberately opaque to the user in terms of what your intent is and where it's coming from and who's benefiting.
Totally. It's funny though, because I think about the sort of live shopping kind of trend from China. And in some ways I admire it because it's just, I feel like that's more honest, right? Like it just feels more honest to me that like, oh no, this is just like some new version of the shopping channel and you're going to tune in on Singles Day and we're going to have fun. And the idea is to shop, Spencer's. And I truly think as like an internet user myself, like I just want to know like, what's the deal? Like just tell me what the deal is and great. Like I will tune in to maybe I will tune into Singles Day. I don't know. Like I have found myself staring at Home Shopping Network at 3 a.m. And so in some ways I feel like the candid transaction is something I can respect more, even if I'm like, oh, that's a bit cringe, over the like, exactly that, like it looks like a podcast. Oh, what is this? Oh, it's an ad. And that like fake banana medicine taste afterwards where you're just irritated because you're like, it's this like pernicious creeping into everything. There's just something about that drives me a little bit nuts.
There's so much out there right now. I feel like I'm getting better very quickly at being able to suss out what's AI and what's sponsored. And it's just like kind of insane, my own brain in the last 2 years of like how quickly I've been able to be like, that looks suspicious. But it is kind of, I mean, we said this in our last episode of like accusing someone of using AI as the new witch hunt of just like, then you feel bad. Like I was watching this woman she was like messaging and she suspected that the person she was messaging who was like a cold reach out was AI, and she's an AI researcher. And so she said something like, I love to have duck liver for breakfast. And if it were a person, that person would be like, what the fuck? Like that's like just out of context, weird thing to say. But because it's AI, it was like, duck sounds very nutritious. Perfect. And she's like, okay, this isn't a person. So it's just weird because it is this, in some ways it's kind of helpful to realize how much like the human brain is able to suss out bullshit. But on the other hand, it's kind of spooky because now it's like this whole other level of shit we have to worry about of like, just an even higher stakes. Every year the stakes get higher for like, is this real or not? Like, is this a real thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think even the like something I've sort of been thinking a lot about recently, just because I'm now working at a bank and sort of thinking about things like paying bills and, stuff like that, is around trial subscriptions and I just got hit with one the other day of this thing that, I don't know, I think I was a few glasses of wine in and I was like, sure, I'll download that app and try it. And then I was like, oh man, like, it was like £50. And like how just increasingly we all have these like we're just tricked into things and then it's too late. And then the sort of like irregular payment cycles or, the trial turns into a year-long subscription, not a monthly subscription. So you're paying for that up front. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe this is the time I do use that Jump Speak membership for AI language learning. And then it falls off and then I get charged for it another year. Right. And so like, I think what's driving me a bit nuts about this sort of like inshitification, particularly around subscriptions and finding sneaky ways to sort of make you pay for things is it's just starting to feel like a death by a thousand cuts. Like the other day I opened my Apple, and I went to like the subscriptions via Apple Pay, which at least makes it really easy to then go through and cancel. And I found like 4 that I was like, I literally don't even remember signing up for these.
Yeah. And then that gets into too, like another UX dark pattern, which is no exit traps, right? Of like not being able to get out of these things. Adobe is super famous for having like the most predatory no exit trap. They have this like insane early termination fee, which is if you sign up for a year-long contract and you try to cancel, you end up paying 50% of the whole year anyway. But I recently, like right before we started working on Actually Useful, same thing. I was like a couple glasses of wine in, I was at my parents' house and I got an ad for Thrive Market. And like I said, I'm a bean girl. I love an interesting bean. I'm a bean connoisseur. And I was like, oh, maybe Thrive Market, like they hit me with a bean ad. And I was like, maybe they've got interesting beans. It's a bigger problem than you recognize, trying to source all the interesting beans of the world. I'm a legume girly. And so I signed up for Thrive Market. I was like, this will be great. And then I started looking and I was like, this is like not the inventory was not differentiated enough for me to like warrant actually paying for the subscription. Just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And they had this like refund period. Like they like advertised like you can feel so easy signing up for this because we have this like incredible refund period where you can totally back out of your monthly subscription. I was within the refund period. It was like the next day I went out to reach out to them. I actually took screenshots of the whole process because they upsold me 11 times. Like I'm like going back and forth with this bot that keeps trying to keeps being like, what if you did it for like 5% of the price? And I was like, now I'm doing it out of spite. Like now I'm pulling out of spite because I'm really fucking annoyed that you say you have this like this perfect refund policy and it's like, no hassle, get rid of it, whatever. And then you're sitting here and I'm talking to this like AI companion. I'm writing in all caps, stop, please stop, just let me out. So like, yeah, some of these no exit traps are just like so frustrating. And I've got to think that they affect like brand, like your brand footprint. Like you got to think that that's like not a good look if I just been able to cancel gracefully.
This is the thing that sort of drives me nuts, particularly around dark UX patterns that sort of entrap you and then make it incredibly difficult to leave. I think the term is like Roach Motel.
It is called Roach Motel. Yeah.
Yeah. I just Googled it. It's stealing my time, right? And I just feel like time is increasingly, I am, millions of years old. I'm 43. Increasingly, my time is like the most valuable thing I have in my life. And trying to cancel a membership and then having to spend time going through 11 upsells to get out of there. I just like it infuriates me. And I know I'm really lucky. Like I don't have kids. I don't have a lot of demands on my time is very much my own outside of my job. And so I'm trying to picture how many people just at, attempt number 7 in that 11-step upsell process are just like, fine, fuck it. I'm now just paying 5% of a Thrive membership for the rest of my life. I live here now.
No, I think the whole system is built on, it's back to the credit card and interest. It's built on people not being financially responsible, not understanding what traps they're getting into, and then propped up by a bunch of rich people that can afford to do that. And then all the people in the middle that just really, it sucks for them and they're in debt. And so many Americans and people all over the world are just in debt. And now we have, pay your DoorDash on credit.
Insane.
Basically.
Insane.
Yeah.
Get your basic needs on credit, and you're just going to be forever chained to these services that you can't really get rid of because, it's how you're getting your basic food, water, services, transportation.
Yeah, there's a grocery store chain in Canada that now accepts, it's not Klarna, but it's one of those pay in 3 installments. And they like promoted it as this like wonderful thing. And I was just like, oh my God, like what commentary is this that like...
it means people can't afford groceries. That's literally what it means. Yeah.
And the public transportation sucks. So you have to take Uber, you have to take these other tech services.
Now we really are just encompassing all of late stage capitalism. This is what it looks like, folks. Yeah.
Dark UX.
Marcos, I'm curious. I saw you on LinkedIn. I saw you comment. You did not say this, so I'm curious your thoughts, but you commented on somebody who posted she was anti-NPS. So for those who don't know, NPS is Net Promoter Score. It is a like long running metric that product people use. It is essentially is if you've ever used an app and it says, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend? They're measuring NPS. There was a period of time where that was like the peak way to know if your product was good or not. And now the tides are turning against NPS. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts, like what is the new way to figure out if people are happy? And on the converse, like what is the best way to measure UX harm? Like, because there's also like, we're talking about dark patterns. There's also anti-patterns, which is when you do it by accident, where it's like, it's not an intentional hostility towards the user. It's just sort of like, a lot of times this falls in a lot of engagement overload issues where you have lots and lots of modals is actually an anti-pattern. And it's because the people who work for the company who are designing this, they're like cookied and logged in such a way that they're not experiencing it as if they're a first-time visitor. So I'm curious, like, what are the measurements that you would recommend to try to monitor UX harm and see that users are actually having a great time?
Oh, that's a really good question. Quickly on NPS, I feel like I don't know when product decided it's from marketing. And so marketing uses NPS. It's a marketing metric. And so I actually get insane because I hate when people in product are like, oh, we should use it for NPS. I'm like, how often, I am never going to turn to my friend and say like, Microsoft Excel just really delivers a world-class spreadsheet experience. I don't know if you've thought about that. And so that's what makes me nuts when I sit in a meeting and a product person is like, we should, like, what's the NPS on this? I'm like, I understand why brands measure this. That makes sense to me. I always try to push product people to around CSAT, right? So like, customer satisfaction, where you're asking questions of like, were you able to achieve the thing you wanted to achieve today? How easy was it to achieve the thing you wanted to, where you're sort of measuring satisfaction around task. If we need to use one, that's what I would recommend using. But also, I just feel like now, every time I do anything on the internet, I'm being sent an NPS survey. And so to me, it's also a question of like, this data is garbage because either, the response rates for NPS are very low. That's why they sort of flood them. But how many times are people just sort of like clicking through it and not, putting any thought into it? Because at this point we're just so saturated with, how satisfied are you surveys. I bought something recently. I don't even remember what it was. I just got my 5th reminder to send in a customer satisfaction survey. And I was like, yo, you're even worse than LinkedIn cold callers. Y'all leave me alone. And from a researcher perspective, I then start to think a little bit about like, okay, so if someone then on the 4th cold email from that sends us, answers a survey and at this point is annoyed that like the information you are now getting is like bad.
It's compromised. Yeah.
It's compromised. It's, you're going to get like poor signal. And so even just from a like, I care about, obtaining good data, that drives me nuts. In terms of how to measure harm, that's a really good question. Some of it, I often think about like, this is going to sound so corny and so corporate and so LinkedIn, so I apologize, is like really anchoring on like jobs to be done and then measuring time on task to jobs to be done. Like how easy was it for someone to get where they, to complete the user journey? Where did they, like, are they getting stuck somewhere? Are they getting lost somewhere? So that kind of like time on task or time on screen, like heat mapping that helps you understand like where people are going and like, are they lost? Those are the sorts of things I think that we should be looking at to understand, like, are we making it difficult, for people to get in, do their business and get out? Whether that be, let me add money to my Monzo, whether that be, let me see what Bethany Frankel is ranting about on Instagram, or, let me see like what is the newest collapse of democracy happening on my news app. There are instances where friction should be built in for good reasons. I often think about like email and Merlot, don't mix. So like there are places where friction makes a lot of sense, but I think the harder we make it to just get through a user journey, like we are causing damage there because people are losing time. And to me, that is just like probably the easiest read on measuring harm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I work a lot with like very, very early stage products, very early stage founders. And there's this, I did not come up with this, but there is a really bullseye question that you can do in like prospective target customer interviews, which is that if you show them a bunch of prototypes or mocks or like things that are like have limited interaction of the product that you're trying to get to and you're trying to like suss out product market fit for, if you're showing it to these prospective target audience members and they are interacting with your mock, and at some point they say, is this real? Like, is this a real product? Could I use this? That is like the bullseye. Like, you know, without a doubt, if they say that unprompted, you are onto something. You are getting to product market fit. This is the right kind of audience. And I'm so curious, like, if there is, or if someone has come up with like that sort of bullseye statement from a long-term user of like what, I mean, I think I understand where marketing came from, where they were like, would you recommend it to a friend? Like, it does have that sort of whiff of simplicity and elegance of like, yeah, if you like in a world where you're not getting you're not getting like an actual pop-up asking you, that is legitimate. Like, if I were to recommend to AJ, like I just recommended Finch at the top of this podcast and Focus Friend. Yeah. Those are apps I genuinely love to use. Like that word of mouth is real, but there's no way to measure it from the brand's perspective because perhaps it's happening organically. And so I would love for someone to come up with sort of like what's the bullseye question that a company can actually try to source and study in some way for like an existing user to figure out like, are you actually having a good time? You know?
I mean, the marketing departments do have word of mouth metrics. I don't know how much astrology they are and how much like hard science they are. It is interesting to me. I think like Monzo, not to like, you know, the company I work for, but is a really good example of that, where it makes banking really easy. And so the word of mouth, like the sort of word of mouth and brand love are like we're doing something correct on the basis of just this like tiny digital bank that is not 10 years old has exploded and is the 7th largest bank in the UK. And so that to me feels, for like a later stage company, obviously not one necessarily trying to find its first product market fit. To me, that's really good evidence.
Like sentiment analysis.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Marcos, before we leave with you, what is giving you hope for a future where products are kinder to their users? Who are you listening to? What are you following? Obviously, you're having a great time at Monzo.
Who am I listening to right now? I'm actually a little bit in a dark hole at the moment where I'm reading a lot of like very dystopic science fiction because I don't know if I have a ton of hope. It's so funny because I feel like in the EU, people like crap on it all the time. And outside of the EU, everyone looks to the EU like it's going to be the United Federation of Planets someday. Yeah. I am curious to see the like dark UX legislation that's coming out of the EU, how that is hopefully going to create some change or drive some initiative towards like simplification. That's kind of where I'm at, which is a bit bleak.
Well, it also, I'm listening to it from the US, and I actually feel like it's kind of like I'm jealous that you're sitting here. I know the UK is not in the EU anymore, but like
alas,
that you're sitting there being like, you know, that you're like, oh, if I'm asking you what's giving you hope for the future, and you kind of said the government, like that's crazy, right? Like for me, where I'm sitting right now, that's a fucking crazy thing to say, you know?
Yeah, so. I mean, I'm a Spanish national, so at some point I might just go full Gertrude Stein and flee to Europe. Even more so. But I mean, I think that's part of the problem with some of this is that like why, like we can't expect companies to do this, right? And so to me, maybe I'm just sort of like an old school Marxist. Like it needs to be done at the level of the state. Like there has to be state intervention to guardrail and protect citizens from like the inevitable arc of private capital and private interests, which is to like, how can we optimize to make the owners of production as much money as possible?
Hell yeah, brother.
On that note.
Yeah. Should we go Falcon mode?
Yes. Marcos, can you give us your best Falcon impression?
Oh God, I've held a falcon, but I've done falconry.
Oh, you've held a falcon.
I've like done falconry, but I've never. What does one sound like? I don't even.
Just go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just give it a shot.
No, because I'm just like.
No, this is fun. We do this now. This is our thing we do now with our guests.
Like, I have no idea what they sound like, actually.
That's the best one.
Oh,
You sounded like an animated rooster when you did that,
Yeah.
honestly. Like,
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is our listener segment where we take a listener idea and we figure out how to make it useful, feasible, and fundable. / we just kind of bat it around to be like, is this a thing? AJ, do you want to read this week's?
I do, and I'm so passionate about this one. So this one comes from Mike. Mike says, why isn't there an app that tells travelers how long the wait time is at the TSA line? And for international folks, TSA is like what it's called in the US, but it's also just like, airport security line.
Yeah, airport. Like, why is there not an app to know how long it actually is going to take you to get through the airport? So for this problem, I tried to figure this out. I will actually say SeaTac, the Seattle airport, does supposedly have live feed, I think they're cameras of their TSA lines, of their security lines throughout the airport. However, it is currently down. So I have never seen it actually work. It is currently like getting improved or whatever. I tried to feel like, is anyone actually doing this? They do have this information. I think it's very relevant for our dark pattern episode that like all airport technology innovation has been to further surveil our biometrics and not to like make the process of traveling any easier.
They've totally just taken money from private companies like Clear.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm super dubious that a lot of the things about airport security are actually for security. I mean, famously, the whole like, you can't have liquids is like, if they actually thought the liquids were flammable or explosive, why would they have us pour it out in a giant trash can that's sitting in the middle of security where everybody is? Like, obviously, you just want us to buy beverages from the airport,
No, Pearson, the airport in Toronto, which like 0 out of 10 do not recommend, it has it on its website so that you can see the wait times on the website.
Okay, but so some airports are doing this.
Yeah, but I feel like there's something here because I think about like, it just sits in my like travel folder on my phone and I can check like any airport I'm going to. That could also let me know like I'm a bit of a lounge diva. And so like how much
Lounges.
more, I'm
or
like
food options, like where a good
Yeah.
coffee shop is, what terminals have what. Because sometimes you're like, do I want to walk all the, like, should I take this coffee, like this shittier coffee here or like walk longer? So if you could like any like airport mapping, it's crazy that there's not something better for that.
I love the idea of, okay, so this would sit on, airports all sort of like feed this information in. I feel like a lot of them probably do have this on a website somewhere. Is there a way to like scrape that, put it into an app so you can look up, okay, I need to go to this airport. What are the wait times? And that lets you make decisions around, to your point, AJ, around like, do I get good coffee before I go through security? Do I, or is the wait going to be so long? No, I need to go now. I think like it would let you make some interesting trade-offs. I think about like people traveling with small children, which I always feel like sorry for, of like, how do I optimize for toddler meltdown in a security line,
Totally.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. Like now I'm like blowing this out to a whole thing where I'm like, it would be, I mean, it's kind of problematic because anytime you have like super personalization, I feel like the methods to get there is kind of problematic, but it would be cool if you could like, say what mode you're in on your journey. Like, are you hungry and trying to get a quick meal to catch your flight? Are you like trying to chill in a lounge? I travel with my cat a lot. And it's like when I'm doing that, he's like 16 pounds. My primary prerogative is to be seated. Like, I don't want to be lugging this cat around. So like giving it sort of like, what's your mode right now? And like, here's the path through the airport. But these airports, they do have, I mean, all airports have information for their own staff of like how busy the security stations are. Obviously there's like a lot of different, like it's not just one security line because there's like pre-check, there's global entry, there's the plebes, there's different paths, different terminals. And so like you'd have to get a lot of information. I think crowdsourcing would be kind of unreliable. And this app would be totally useless if it didn't work reliably. But this is information. I think maybe there's a security question of like, can someone use this information maliciously to like, that's got to be the reason that people aren't doing it is because there's like a malicious actor risk. But I don't really know what that risk would be. I don't know what you would do with that information other than be like, oh, there's not a lot of staff at TSA right now. But like, I don't honestly think TSA is like equipped for much malicious intent anyway. Like, I just don't think that that's what they do.
Okay, this is hilarious. So I just looked up the like Toronto Pearson wait time dashboard, and it also includes like all the check-in counter, like what are the wait times for like check-in counters. And now I'm getting coupons for like airport parking, which feels very apt to this podcast. I was like, yes, of course.
Yeah. I feel like this would also have to be like a publicly funded project. As AJ said, the airport is already full of like private companies trying to like get involved in your quote unquote security. Yeah. So like, I don't even know who would make this in a way that was like reliable and useful unless it was the people, the traveling people.
I mean, to play devil's advocate, maybe the shops inside, they have an incentive to try to get people.
You're right. That is true.
So they could kind of like advertise on this and be like, hey, it's a 20-minute wait, it's only 20 minutes, like come enjoy a free beverage on us or something. I don't know. They could I think the businesses inside have an incentive to get people through security and shopping.
I also feel like
quicker.
Airlines have an incentive to do this, right? Like, why is this not part of every airline app?
Well, somebody should build it. Listeners, we want to hear from you. Please send us your product ideas, problems that might be solvable with tech, things you've been noodling on, and we will bat it around and disseminate it out to the people. You can DM us on social media, or you can email us old school at heyactuallyuseful@gmail.com. Marcos, it has been a pleasure to chat with you today.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
I super appreciate you joining us. And I hope everybody has an amazing week, and we will talk to you all later.
Ciao, ciao.
Actually Useful is part of the Industry Plant Podcast Network. It's co-hosted by Ariel Butters and AJ Weaver. It's executive produced and edited by Josh Stratton Carlson. If you like the show, please consider subscribing to our Substack or YouTube at Actually Useful Pod, or give us a follow on most social media platforms.